Imagine spending like months of your life and thousands of your hard-earned dollars completely rebuilding your 4WD's engine from scratch.
Oh, yeah, doing the hard yards.
Exactly. You've torqued every single bolt. You've bled every line. I mean, you've poured your soul into this machine.
And then the big day finally comes.
Right? The moment of truth. You turn the key, fully expecting that beautiful, steady rumble. But instead, the engine just coughs.
Oh, no.
It struggles to idle, and you look back and see a massive, blinding cloud of thick white smoke just filling your entire driveway.
That is just totally devastating.
You are devastated. And the worst part is you find out later the culprit wasn't some catastrophic failure of your mechanical skills. It was a single tiny oversight.
Usually is.
The supplier gave you a head gasket that was just a fraction of a millimeter too thick. And that tiny sliver of metal ruined your entire year.
Yeah, because that fraction of a millimeter, it's the difference between a diesel engine running perfectly and an engine that simply refuses to cooperate.
Which is wild.
It is. I mean, when you are dealing with the physics of internal combustion, there is just no margin for error.
And that brings us to our mission today. Welcome to this deep dive on the Berrima Diesel podcast. We are speaking directly to you, the Australian 4WD ute and towing owners out there.
Absolutely.
Picture this scenario, right? You are pushing your rig up a steep, rutted, really tricky section of a track up in the high country.
Working it hard.
Yeah, working it really hard. You check your rearview mirror, and instead of clear mountain air, you see plumes of exhaust smoke just billowing out the back.
Not what you want to see.
No, not at all. So what is your engine actually trying to tell you? Today, we are decoding those smoke signals because knowing how to read them well, it's the literal difference between saving a few $100s on maintenance or causing catastrophic engine melting damage to your vehicle.
And we are grounding this entire analysis today in an incredible stack of source material.
Yeah, this isn't just forum talk.
No, exactly. We aren't looking at anonymous internet advice or guesswork here. We are pulling directly from decades of real, hands-on workshop experience and technical notes compiled by Berrima Diesel Service, operating out of Berrima, New South Wales.
Which is amazing.
It is. This is hard-earned, practical diagnostic knowledge.
And the heritage behind this specific source material, it really struck me. I mean, we are talking about a genuine three-generation family business that is just deeply embedded in the Australian diesel landscape.
Yeah, the roots actually go all the way back to 1956. You have Reinhard Leimroth, who's affectionately known in the industry as OPA.
OPA, yeah.
He started working with diesels when the technology was, purely mechanical, heavy, and totally unforgiving.
Old school stuff.
Very old school. And he passed that foundational knowledge down to his son, Andrew, who actually completed his apprenticeship under OPA.
Oh.
Yeah. And then Andrew carried the business into its second generation, adapting to all the new technologies. And today, the legacy continues with Andrew's sons, Trent and Baden, operating Berrima Diesel, with the next generation already getting their hands dirty in the workshop.
That's incredible. It represents an unbroken, continuous chain of mechanical wisdom spanning nearly 70 years.
Exactly. And you can really feel that generational weight in their core philosophy.
Yeah, you really can. I mean, when a family has been pulling apart diesel engines since the 1950s, a very specific mindset takes hold.
Definitely.
And the Berrima Diesel golden rule, which we will use as our compass today, is super simple. Diagnose first, do not guess, and throw parts at it.
Right, because the modern instinct in a lot of workshops today, and certainly for a lot of DIY mechanics at home, is to just start replacing expensive components the very second a symptom appears.
Yeah, like you see smoke, you immediately assume the turbo is blown.
Exactly. So you order a $2,000 part, you bolt it on, and guess what?
The car still smokes.
The car still smokes. The Berrima approach demands a complete reversal of that mindset. The color of the smoke coming out of your exhaust is merely a clue.
A starting point.
Right. It's the starting point of a thorough investigation, never the final verdict.
So reading diesel smoke is essentially like tracking animal footprints in the bush.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Like you see a footprint in the mud, something passed by. But if you just look at the print in isolation, you might guess wrong.
You don't know what left it.
Exactly. You have to look at the surrounding environment, like the time of day, the depth of the track in the soil, to know whether you're tracking a kangaroo, a wild dog, or something much heavier.
Yeah. The footprint tells you to start looking, but the environment gives you the actual answer.
Right.
And that analogy works perfectly here. The smoke color is the footprint, but the environment, meaning the temperature of the engine, the load you are carrying, the specific RPMs that dictates the actual repair.
Context is everything.
It really is. But before we even break down the specific footprints, the white, the black, and the blue smoke, we need to establish a baseline of why these engines smoke in the first place.
Well, let me jump in there because I hear this argument all the time from people who just bought a brand new 4WD straight off the showroom floor.
Oh, I know where this is going.
They assume that because they have a modern computerized diesel with all these high-tech emission systems, specifically diesel particulate filters or DPFs, that they are completely immune to smoke issues.
Yeah, they think smoke is just a problem for old farm tractors.
Exactly.
But here's the reality. Modern emissions systems are incredibly effective at trapping soot, sure, but they do not prevent the underlying engine malfunctions that actually create this soot.
Right.
A DPF is essentially, it's a high-tech garbage can in your exhaust pipe.
A garbage can, yeah.
It catches the smoke before you can see it in your rearview mirror. But if your engine is running poorly and producing excessive smoke, that DPF is going to fill up rapidly.
And then what happens?
Well, the vehicle will then have to perform constant burn-offs to try and clear the filter. And that just destroys your fuel economy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And eventually, the filter will clog completely, which forces the car into limp mode.
Nobody wants limp mode.
No. So whether you drive a vintage mechanical rig or a computer-controlled modern ute, the fundamental causes of poor combustion remain exactly the same. And the brutal reality is that diesel smoke ultimately equals lost money.
Because smoke is physical evidence of inefficiency, right?
Yeah.
It means the energy in the fuel isn't being converted into forward momentum, it's just being blown out the back.
Exactly. Every puff of smoke is a microscopic fraction of a cent escaping your wallet.
Just burning cash.
Pretty much. I mean, something as remarkably simple as a blocked air filter will restrict the engine's ability to breathe. That creates an imbalance that actively produces smoke.
And you are paying for fuel that isn't doing any work.
Right. To properly diagnose that inefficiency, you can't just stare at the tailpipe. You have to analyze scan data, perform physical injector testing, run airflow volume checks, and, execute compression tests.
But I want to challenge the premise slightly, though. Let's look at the reality of how these vehicles are actually used.
Okay, lay it on me.
If I'm in low range, crawling up a serious loose rock incline in the Victorian high country, the engine is screaming and the vehicle weighs like 3 tons. Am I really supposed to panic and cancel my whole trip at the very first sight of a single puff of smoke?
No, you should definitely not panic at a single puff.
Okay, good.
The laws of physics dictate that when you rapidly increase the load on a diesel engine, say you bury the throttle to get over a large boulder, there will be a momentary lag.
Like turbo lag.
Exactly. There's a lag before the turbocharger can spool up and deliver enough air to match that sudden influx of fuel.
I see.
So in that brief split second of imbalance, the engine is going to chug a tiny amount of exhaust smoke.
Just a little burp.
Yeah, that is typical. What we're looking for is sustained smoke. Anything more than a momentary puff under sudden load should ring alarm bells.
You really have to know your car.
You do. You must establish a baseline for what your specific vehicle looks and sounds like when it's healthy so you can immediately spot any deviation.
That makes total sense. So let's get into the bush and start looking at these specific footprints, starting with the first major signal.
Let's do it.
You glance in the mirror, and the smoke isn't dark or sooty. It is a thick, ghost white cloud. What is the actual physical makeup of that white cloud?
Well, white smoke is incredibly distinct, both visually and olfactorily. Like, it will often sting your eyes if you stand behind the car.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's potent. When you see a billowing white cloud from a diesel exhaust, you are actually looking at raw, completely unburnt fuel.
Wait, it hasn't combusted at all. It just went straight through the entire engine block.
Yeah, it was vaporized by the heat, but it never ignited. To grasp why this happens, we really have to pull back the curtain on the diesel combustion cycle, specifically this concept called adiabatic heating.
Okay, adiabatic heating.
Right. So a petrol engine is simple. It uses a spark plug to ignite the fuel.
Yeah, standard spark.
But a diesel engine has no spark plugs. It relies entirely on extreme pressure to generate heat.
Just pressure.
Just pressure. As the piston travels up the cylinder, it compresses the air into a tiny space. And according to the laws of thermodynamics, Rapidly compressing a gas raises its temperature significantly.
So the air gets so hot just from being squeezed that it becomes the actual ignition source.
Yes, exactly. The air inside a diesel cylinder can easily exceed 800 degrees Celsius just from the force of compression.
800 degrees, that is insane.
It is. And once that air reaches maximum temperature, the injector fires the diesel fuel into the cylinder.
And boom.
Boom! The fuel hits that superheated air and auto-ignites instantaneously. But this requires two things to be flawless: immense cylinder pressure to create the heat, and microscopic precision in the fuel timing.
Right, they have to work together perfectly.
If either of those factors is compromised, the temperature won't be high enough to ignite the fuel.
So what happens to it?
The liquid diesel just vaporizes into a white mist and gets pumped right out the exhaust valves.
Wow. Okay, so let's break down those two factors.
Yeah.
What actually causes the pressure to drop to a point where the fuel fails to ignite?
Well, we can look at this from two angles. There's the compression of the air and the pressure of the fuel delivery.
Let's start with fuel pressure.
Okay, if the injector pump cannot build enough pressure behind the fuel, it just can't deliver the necessary volume at the precise millisecond required.
And what causes that? Is it a broken pump?
Sometimes, but the most common culprits are actually incredibly mundane. We're talking tiny air leaks entering the fuel lines, or severe blockages in the fuel filter that just restrict the flow to the pump.
Just a dirty filter.
Yep, a dirty filter.
So how does the engine physically react when it's starved of that fuel pressure? Because I would assume it sounds rough, aggressive, maybe a bit violent.
Actually, the symptoms are highly counterintuitive, which is exactly why diagnostics is such a specialized field.
Oh, really?
Yeah. A diesel engine suffering from low internal pump pressure will often sound significantly quieter than normal.
Wait, quieter? That makes no sense at all. A sick engine should sound sick.
You'd think so, but think about what causes the classic clattering sound of a diesel engine.
The combustion.
Exactly. It's the violent, explosive force of the auto-ignition inside the cylinder. So when the pump pressure is low, less fuel is being injected, or it's being injected with less force.
Oh, I see.
The resulting combustion is much weaker. The explosive force is dampened, so the engine actually loses its aggressive mechanical clatter.
That is so weird.
It sounds smooth, almost subdued. But the real giveaway is the throttle response. You put your foot down and the engine splutters, hesitates, and flat out refuses to rev up.
It just has no power to respond to your input.
Exactly.
Okay, so a quiet, sluggish engine blowing white smoke points toward a lack of fuel pressure. But what about the physical delivery mechanism? What if the pump has pressure, but the actual injector itself is failing?
In workshop terminology, we call this the dribbling injector scenario.
Dribbling injector. Doesn't sound great.
It isn't. An injector's sole purpose is to take highly pressurized fuel and force it through microscopic holes to create a perfectly atomized, incredibly fine mist.
Like an aerosol can.
Basically, yeah. We are talking about droplets so small they literally hang in the air. This fine mist maximizes the surface area of the fuel, which allows it to mix seamlessly with the compressed air and burn instantly.
But wear and tear changes the shape of those microscopic holes over time, doesn't it?
It does. Or microscopic debris gets past a cheap fuel filter and physically scores the inside of the injector nozzle.
Just scratches it up.
Right. And when the nozzle is damaged, that perfect spray pattern just collapses. Instead of a fine, atomized mist, the fuel physically dribbles, squirts, or drops into the cylinder in large, concentrated globs.
Oh, man. I'm picturing trying to light a solid log of wood with a single match versus trying to light a handful of sawdust.
That's a great analogy.
Right. The sawdust goes up instantly because of the huge surface area, but the solid log just sits there and smolders.
That is the exact physics at play. The intense heat of the cylinder tries to ignite that large glob of dribbling diesel, but it can only burn the outside layer.
So the core of it doesn't burn at all.
No, the core of the droplet doesn't burn. It just vaporizes. The result is unburnt fuel exiting as white smoke.
And does this sound quiet too?
No, actually. Crucially, unlike the low pump pressure scenario, which makes the engine quiet, a dribbling injector usually makes the engine violently noisier.
Because of the globs.
Yeah. The irregular, poorly timed burn creates harsh, localized pressure spikes in the cylinder. That leads to a severe metallic knocking sound.
Wow. This really highlights why the Berrima Diesel diagnose first mindset is mandatory.
It absolutely is.
Because if you just look at white smoke and start guessing, you could spend thousands of dollars replacing all your injectors because you read on some forum that white smoke means bad injectors.
Right.
But your engine is actually running quietly, meaning the injectors are probably fine, and you just have a $10 air leak in a fuel hose causing low pump pressure.
And guessing like that is financial ruin. And the stakes of guessing go far beyond simple bolt-on parts, too.
Yeah. Let's return to the incredible anecdote from the source notes regarding the 80 series Land Cruiser.
The 80 series tragedy.
The tragedy, we touched on this at the beginning, but let's really unpack the mechanics of what went wrong, because it perfectly illustrates the absolute necessity of precision here.
For sure.
The customer brings in this legendary 1HZ engine. He's done the hard yards. He rebuilt the entire block himself.
Huge job.
Massive. But it's blowing white smoke, it has zero power, and it takes minutes of cranking just to get it to start. He's hit a wall and brings it to Berrima Diesel.
And the diagnostic process there revealed just a heartbreaking reality.
What did they find?
The entire rebuild was fundamentally compromised by a single parts ordering error. The gasket. Yes. When you rebuild an engine, the engine block and the cylinder head are often sent to a machine shop to be skimmed, meaning a microscopic layer of metal is shaved off to ensure the mating surfaces are perfectly flat.
Okay, so it seals tight.
Right. But because metal is removed, the piston will now sit slightly higher relative to the top of the block.
So you have to compensate for that missing metal to ensure the piston doesn't literally smash into the valves.
Exactly. And to compensate, manufacturers produce head gaskets in varying thicknesses.
Right.
But the parts supplier, lacking the specific expertise of the Berrima team, simply handed the customer a generic replacement gasket. He completely failed to ask about the machining tolerances.
Oh, no.
He supplied a gasket that was slightly thicker than what the engine mathematically required.
So the customer takes this home, bolts this thick gasket onto the block, tightens the cylinder head down, and inadvertently changes the internal geometry of the entire engine.
He increased the internal volume of the cylinder at top dead center by a fraction of a millimeter.
Just a fraction.
Just a fraction. But remember our discussion on adiabatic heating.
Yeah, the pressure-making heat.
Right. By increasing the volume, he decreased the compression ratio. The piston could no longer squeeze the air tightly enough to generate the 800 degrees of heat required for auto-ignition.
Wow. So he engineered a low-compression defect straight into a brand-new engine.
He did. All that bled, sweat, and money was totally negated because he didn't realize that in a diesel engine, compression is a fragile, mathematically precise environment.
That is wild.
A thicker gasket might barely register on an old, low-compression petrol V8, but on a diesel, it destroys the thermodynamic cycle entirely.
It's a terrifying cautionary tale. But I have to ask, does this white smoke issue apply universally across the board?
Yeah.
Like from old farm trucks right up to modern luxury 4WDs?
Well, the physics apply universally, but how the vehicles physically react to the problem has evolved significantly.
How so?
White smoke is really notorious in older diesels equipped with mechanical rotary injector pumps. Those older mechanical systems rely on physical springs, governors, and manual adjustments to maintain pressure.
Mechanical parts wear out.
Exactly. As they wear out, they drift out of specification, the pressure drops, and you get that classic white smoke.
But a modern vehicle relies on computers.
Right. Modern common rail diesels operate in a completely different universe of pressure.
How different?
Well, an older rotary pump might inject fuel at a few thousand psi. A modern common rail system stores fuel in a shared rail at up to 30,000 psi.
30,000. That's not a fuel line, that's a water jet cutter. That would slice right through your hand.
It absolutely would.
Yeah.
And because the pressures are so extreme, the tolerances are microscopic. The engine control unit, the computer, it monitors that rail pressure thousands of times a second.
So it knows the second something is wrong.
Instantaneously. If there is a restriction in the fuel line or the pump begins to fail, the ECU detects the pressure drop instantly. But instead of letting the engine run poorly and blow white smoke, the ECU actually intervenes.
What does it do?
It recognizes that operating a high-pressure system out of specification is incredibly dangerous and could destroy the injectors entirely, so it simply shuts the engine down.
Wait, I want to push back on that from a driver's perspective because that sounds wildly dangerous.
I know it does.
You are telling me that instead of giving me a visual warning like a puff of white smoke that tells me to pull over at the next town, a modern 4WD will just cut the engine completely dead while I'm overtaking a road train on a 2-lane highway.
That is the harsh reality of modern automotive engineering.
That is terrifying.
The manufacturer prioritizes protecting the immensely expensive fuel system over the convenience of a limp home warning. When a common rail system loses its pressure parameters, it just stops. Period. This is why diagnosing white smoke on an older rotary pump requires a highly skilled mechanical tune, prioritizing physical adjustments. Whereas a modern common rail issue requires deep computer diagnostic scanning before you even think about opening the bonnet.
So white smoke is the ghost of fuel that didn't burn. It is the engine failing to ignite the fuel it was given due to a lack of heat, pressure, or atomization.
Exactly.
But let's flip the script entirely.
Okay.
What happens when the compression is perfect, the heat is intense, but we dump an absolute flood of fuel into the cylinder? What happens when it does burn?
We enter the realm of the dreaded black smoke.
The wallet drainer.
The wallet drainer. Black or dark gray smoke is known in the diesel tuning world as the universal, undeniable signal that the engine is overfueling.
So too much fuel.
Way too much fuel. More diesel is being injected into the cylinder than the engine has the oxygen to burn cleanly.
The air-to-fuel ratio is out of balance. We have too much fuel and not enough air. And the common causes mentioned in the Berrima notes are incorrect pump settings, heavily dribbling injectors that dump too much volume, or a physical restriction in the air intake.
Right.
But to really grasp why black smoke is so destructive, we have to look at the chemistry of air-fuel ratios, or AFR.
Yes, the AFR.
And this was a massive aha moment for me, because I grew up tinkering with old petrol cars.
So you know the petrol side.
Yeah, I assumed the thermodynamics were roughly the same across both engine types, but petrol and diesel are essentially mirror images of each other when it comes to heat.
It's true. The reversal of thermodynamic principles between petrol and diesel is probably the single most misunderstood concept in automotive tuning.
Break it down for us.
Let's look at the baseline math. For a standard internal combustion petrol engine, the perfect stoichiometric air-fuel ratio is 14.7 to 1. Let's just round it to 14 to 1.
Okay, 14 parts of air for every 1 part of fuel.
14 to 1, the petrol sweet spot.
Where does diesel sit on that scale?
Well, for a tuned, naturally aspirated, meaning non-turbo diesel engine, 14 to 1 is the absolute threshold of smoke.
Wait, really? The sweet spot for petrol is the limit for diesel?
Exactly. If the ratio drops below 14 to 1, meaning you add more fuel and less air, moving down to 13 to 1 or 12 to 1, the engine will start blowing absolute oodles of thick black soot.
Wow.
A non-turbo diesel only runs clean when it has a huge excess of air, typically sitting around 15 to 1 or 16 to 1.
And what if you bolt a turbocharger onto it?
Well, a turbocharger's job is to force massive volumes of air into the cylinder. Because it's packing so much air in, a tuned turbo diesel needs an even leaner ratio to remain clean.
Leaner meaning more air.
Right. A turbo diesel will typically start to blow black smoke if the ratio drops anywhere below 15 to 1 or 16 to 1.
And here's where the danger zone truly lies for anyone trying to tune their own engine. The relationship between the fuel mixture and internal engine temperatures.
This is the critical point.
Let's start with petrol again. If I have a petrol engine and I purposefully tune it to run rich, meaning I increase the fuel and the ratio down to, say, 12 to 1, what happens to the temperature of the engine?
In a petrol engine, a rich mixture actually acts as a coolant.
A coolant?
Yeah. The excess liquid fuel entering the cylinder absorbs a massive amount of ambient heat as it changes states from a liquid to a vapor. Tuning a petrol engine rich will actually lower the internal combustion temperatures.
Okay, but if I apply that exact same logic to a diesel engine...
You will melt the engine into a block of slag.
A block of slag. Wow, I'm not kidding. In a diesel engine, running a rich, fuel-heavy ratio creates destructively hot exhaust gas temperatures.
I'm trying to picture this physically. So tuning a petrol engine rich is kind of like having a campfire and throwing a massive bucket of wet leaves or damp logs on top of it.
Yes.
You are smothering the reaction. It cools the fire down, creates a bunch of smoke,
Yeah.
but it lowers the heat.
But applying a rich tune to a diesel is like taking a bucket of high-octane racing fuel and violently throwing it onto a bonfire. You aren't smothering anything. You are creating a localized, blindingly hot inferno that is literally going to melt the steel grill you were trying to cook on.
The campfire analogy is brilliant because it perfectly captures the escalation of energy.
It's explosive.
It is.
Yeah.
Diesel fuel contains a massive amount of potential energy. When you dump excess fuel into a highly compressed, oxygen-rich environment, it burns with terrifying intensity.
Terrifying intensity.
Yeah. The more fuel you force into a diesel cylinder without the corresponding massive volume of air to match it, the hotter the exhaust gas temperatures, or EGTs, become.
And when those temperatures exceed the physical limits of the metallurgy.
The destruction is incredibly rapid. The tops of the aluminum pistons will begin to soften and eventually crack under the pressure.
Just crack in half.
Or shatter. The exhaust valves will warp and physically burn away at the edges. The turbine wheel inside the turbocharger, which is situated directly in the path of those superheated exhaust gases. It can literally melt or shatter into pieces.
Oh, man.
We are talking about thousands of dollars in catastrophic damage, all occurring in a matter of seconds while you are, say, pulling a heavy load up a highway incline.
Which highlights just how dangerous backyard tuning really is.
It's playing with fire.
Literally.
Yeah.
I completely understand the temptation, though. You buy an older mechanical turbo diesel, you bolt a bigger exhaust on it, you want a bit more grunt for towing the caravan, and you watch some 5-minute internet video showing you how to turn the main fuel delivery screw on the injector pump.
Oh, I've seen those videos.
Right. You grab a screwdriver, give it a quarter turn in the driveway, and suddenly the car feels a bit punchier.
And the Berrima Diesel notes are incredibly stern regarding this exact scenario.
They don't like it.
They hate it. Without specialized test equipment, tuning a diesel by adjusting the fuel screw in your driveway is literally a game of Russian roulette.
Yeah.
Professional diesel mechanics invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into chassis dynamometers, airflow meters, and specialized AFR sensors specifically to measure these invisible variables.
Because you can't just guess.
You can't. When you blindly turn that fuel screw, you might feel a marginal increase in power in the seat of your pants. But without measuring the actual air-fuel ratio under load, you have absolutely no idea if the engine is running at a safe, cool 16-to-1, or if it's running at a catastrophic, meltingly hot 12-to-1.
You just don't know until it explodes.
Right. You cannot tune by feel. It is not worth risking an entire engine rebuild just to avoid paying a professional to tune it safely on a dyno.
And even if you do take it to a professional, there is this fascinating exception to the black smoke rule that the source notes mention, a phenomenon called carbon burnout.
Oh, yes. Carbon burnout.
How can a perfectly tuned engine still blow black smoke?
Well, this is where diagnostic data trumps visual assumption every time.
Set the scene for us.
Let's say a 4WD is strapped onto a dynamometer. The professional mechanic runs the vehicle under load, and the advanced sensors confirm that the air-fuel ratio is perfectly lean and mathematically safe at 16-to-1.
Okay, so the math is perfect.
The math is perfect. By all laws of physics, the engine should not be producing smoke. Yet, as the engine reaches maximum RPM on the dyno, a massive cloud of black smoke just pours out of the tailpipe.
If the math says it's clean, but your eyes see soot, what is actually happening?
The smoke isn't being generated by the current combustion cycle at all.
Wait, what?
If a vehicle has spent years doing short trips around town, like, never getting truly hot, never being worked hard, a thick, sludgy layer of carbon buildup accumulates inside the exhaust manifold and the exhaust ports.
Just thunk.
Just caked on gunk sitting on the walls. When the mechanic finally puts that vehicle under a severe, sustained, high-temperature load on the dyno, the intense exhaust heat acts like a self-cleaning oven.
Oh, that makes sense.
It literally bakes that old, stagnant carbon off the internal walls and violently blows it out the tailpipe.
So it's not overfueling at all. It's just coughing up years of accumulated dirt, like blowing the dust out of a vacuum cleaner filter before you use it.
Exactly. And the defining characteristic of a carbon burnout is that it is temporary.
It clears up.
Yeah. If you take the vehicle for a sustained, hard run up a highway incline, the smoke will billow out initially, but as the exhaust system reaches maximum temperature and purges all that baked-on carbon, the exhaust will eventually run crystal clear.
But again, you only know it's a harmless carbon burnout and not a dangerous overfueling issue if you have diagnosed and verified the AFR data first.
Data is king.
All right, we've explored the chemistry of the fuel not burning, that's our white smoke, and the chemistry of too much fuel burning, which is the black smoke. Let's pivot to the physical airflow side of the equation.
Good idea.
Because, as we establish, the ratio requires two components, fuel and air. If your fuel delivery is tuned perfectly, but the engine is choking because it can't breathe, the ratio artificially drops, causing black smoke.
Right. A physical restriction in the intake tract is one of the most common and easily solvable causes of poor performance.
Just lack of air.
Yep. If an engine attempts to draw in 16 parts of air, but a blocked air filter only allows 12 parts through, the mixture becomes instantly rich.
And boom, smoke.
The engine overfuels not because there is too much diesel, but because there is too little oxygen.
And the source material provides a fantastic, highly practical DIY diagnostic tip for checking this. The notes acknowledge the reality of working on vehicles in Australia.
Yeah, we aren't in labs.
No. We don't always have a perfectly lit, clinical laboratory garage to work in. Sometimes you are trying to diagnose a problem in a dimly lit farm shed or, out on the side of a dusty track at dusk.
And visual inspection under poor lighting conditions absolutely leads to false conclusions.
You pull a dusty air filter out, it looks a bit gray, you tap it on the tire, and you assume it's fine.
Classic mistake.
So the technical notes recommend using a very specific type of tool for this inspection. They highlight something like a compact 12-volt Milwaukee LED torch, specifically one that outputs a concentrated 160 lumens and features a magnetic base.
Very specific.
Very specific. Why is intense directional light critical for an air filter inspection?
Because you cannot judge the health of a high-density paper air filter just by looking at the surface dirt.
You can't see deep enough.
Exactly. Modern filter media is thick and layered. The microscopic pores deep inside the paper can be completely compacted with fine bull dust, even if the surface looks relatively clean.
Sneaky.
Very. The technique here is to take that powerful concentrated LED light and shine it directly against the internal face of the filter, pointing outwards.
Oh, this makes perfect sense. It's exactly like candling an egg on a farm to check for a yolk.
It is the exact same principle, yeah. When you blast that intense light through the back of the filter, you are looking at the exterior surface. You should see a uniform, even glow of light penetrating the paper across the entire surface area.
And if you don't?
If you see dark, opaque patches where the light simply cannot break through, you have found a deep internal blockage.
Oh, wow.
The filter media is completely choked with microscopic dirt. That specific dark patch is starving the engine of oxygen, destroying your air-fuel ratio and generating the black smoke you see in your mirror.
And the practical genius of having a magnetic base on the torch is that you can just slap it onto the inside of the metal engine bay.
Hands-free.
Keeping both your hands free to unclip the airbox, wrestle the filter out, and manipulate it over the light. It's such a brilliant, accessible workshop trick that any owner can perform in 5 minutes before they start panicking and assuming their turbocharger has failed.
It perfectly embodies the diagnose first ethos. Eliminate the simple physical realities like airflow restrictions before assuming complex mechanical failure.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move to a much more complex mechanical failure. We know airflow is vital, but what happens when the engine starts actively inhaling a fluid it was never designed to burn?
Here we go.
This brings us to the third and final color in our smoke signal spectrum, blue.
Blue smoke is a highly specific and often dreaded indicator.
Dreaded for a reason.
Assuming you haven't mistakenly poured two-stroke fuel into your diesel tank and you are using the correct grade of engine oil in the sump, blue smoke means one indisputable thing. Your engine's lubricating oil is physically invading the combustion cylinders and is being burned alongside the diesel.
And a tiny amount of oil goes a very long way visually, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A microscopic droplet of engine oil slipping into the cylinder on every stroke will produce a massive, lingering cloud of highly visible blue smoke out the exhaust.
But structurally, how is the oil getting in there? I mean, the diesel fuel has high-pressure injectors, the air has the massive intake manifold, but the engine oil is supposed to remain completely sealed away in the crankcase at the bottom of the engine, right?
It is designed to be a completely segregated system. Oil provides a microscopic film between metal parts to prevent friction, and then it's supposed to just drain back down into the sump.
So what breaks down?
Well, when an engine undergoes severe wear and tear or suffers from neglected maintenance, the oil finds two distinct pathways to invade the combustion chamber.
2 paths. Okay, what's the first?
The first pathway is a direct internal mechanical leak. This typically involves the valve stem seals or the oil control rings.
Walk me through the valve stem seals first. What are they and how do they fail?
Okay, the valves sit at the very top of the engine, right in the cylinder head. They open and close thousands of times a minute to let air in and exhaust out.
Lots of moving parts.
Exactly. The stems of these valves need constant oil lubrication so they don't seize up in their guides. However, you don't want that oil dripping down the stem and into the engine block.
That would be bad.
So manufacturers fit small seals, usually made of a heat-resistant rubber, around the top of the valve stems.
Rubber seals under massive heat.
Yeah, and after hundreds of thousands of kilometers of extreme thermal cycling, heating up to operating temperature and cooling back down in the freezing night air, that rubber becomes rock hard, brittle, and eventually it just cracks.
And the seal is broken.
The seal is broken, and gravity simply pulls the oil down the valve stem directly into the combustion chamber.
That makes total sense. It leaks from the top down.
Yeah.
What about the oil control rings? That would be a leak from the bottom up.
Exactly. On the side of every piston, there are typically 3 metal rings. The top 2 are compression rings, designed to seal the explosive force of combustion.
Right.
The bottom ring is the oil control ring. Its job is to physically scrape the microscopic layer of oil off the cylinder wall as the piston moves down, preventing it from entering the combustion area.
So it's basically a squeegee.
A metal squeegee, yeah. But if the engine is subjected to dirty oil, or if a blocked air filter allows abrasive dust into the engine, that oil control ring physically wears down.
It loses its edge.
It loses its tension entirely. It no longer scrapes the cylinder wall clean, and on the next upward stroke, the oil is pushed right into the combustion zone.
Man. Okay, so those are the direct internal mechanical leaks. But the Berrima notes detail a second pathway for oil to enter the engine, and it is a fascinating, almost parasitic mechanical loop. It's called blow-by.
Blow-by, yeah.
How does an engine end up cannibalizing itself through the intake plumbing?
Blow-by is a symptom of severe internal degradation. Remember the compression rings we just discussed?
The top 2 rings.
Right. Their job is to contain the immense 800-degree explosive pressure of the diesel combustion. As an engine ages and the cylinder walls wear slightly oval-shaped over time, those rings can no longer maintain a perfect seal.
The seal breaks.
Yes. During the violent explosive stroke, a small percentage of that high-pressure combustion gas forces its way past the rings, shooting down into the crankcase.
Down into the bottom where the oil pools sit.
Exactly.
But the crankcase isn't designed to hold pressure. It's just a storage reservoir for the oil.
Precisely. If that explosive pressure builds up inside the crankcase, it will literally blow the main engine seals completely out of the block, causing catastrophic oil loss.
It would just pop them right out.
It would. To prevent this, engineers developed a venting system. There is a tube called the positive crankcase vent, or PCV tube, that runs from the top of the engine block directly back into the main air intake plumbing.
Okay.
Its purpose is to take any mild, harmless pressure from the crankcase and feed it back into the engine's intake to be burned off safely.
I see the trap forming here. If the rings are severely worn, we aren't just dealing with mild, harmless pressure anymore.
Not at all. We are dealing with violent, continuous blasts of combustion gas shooting into the oil pan.
Wow.
This intense pressure whips the hot liquid engine oil into a turbulent, fine mist.
So it aerosolizes the oil.
Yeah. That thick, oily vapor is then forcefully evacuated out of the crankcase, pushed up through the PCV tube, and dumped directly into the main air intake.
That is insane.
The engine is literally inhaling its own atomized sump oil with every single breath. It burns it, creates blue smoke, and the cycle continues until the engine runs completely out of oil and seizes.
And there is a wonderfully pragmatic, old-school diagnostic test for this, isn't there? The Berrima notes refer to it as the steam train test.
The steam train. I love this test.
How does a backyard mechanic check for this severe blow-by without dismantling the whole intake?
It is the fastest, most decisive visual check you can perform on a used diesel engine. You get the engine up to full operating temperature, leave it idling in neutral, and you carefully unscrew the oil filler cap located right on the top of the rocker cover.
Carefully, because if it has severe blow-by, it's going to fight back.
Exactly. You don't just yank it off. You unscrew it and gently lift it. A healthy engine will have a slight pulsating puff of air escaping, which is entirely normal.
Just a little breath.
Yeah, but if you lift that cap and you immediately feel a forceful, aggressive blast of pressure hitting your hand, accompanied by thick, chugging puffs of oily vapor that make the engine look exactly like an old steam train pulling out of a station,
Yeah.
you have confirmed severe blow-by.
And what is the remedy for a steam train engine?
Unfortunately, there is no magic additive or bolt-on part that fixes it.
I figured.
If your engine is chugging vapor from the oil cap, the internal compression rings and cylinder bores are fundamentally worn out. A complete engine-out, bottom-end rebuild is almost certainly in your near future.
Ouch. Okay, the mechanics of oil burning are clear. But here is where I hit a massive hidden trap in the source notes, and I really need to push back on the premise that burning oil is always a highly visible, obvious event.
Oh, this is the scary part.
It is. The Berrima text states explicitly that a high-compression diesel engine can run remarkably strong for thousands of kilometers while aggressively burning oil, and yet it might not produce a single visual trace of blue smoke out the exhaust.
None at all.
How is that physically possible? I mean, if the oil is burning, shouldn't we see the blue sud?
This is one of the most deceptive and dangerous characteristics of modern diesel engines. To understand this, we have to strip away our preconceptions about fuel and look at the fundamental chemistry.
Okay, chemistry lesson.
Diesel fuel at its core is just a highly refined, very light grade of oil. It is vastly closer in chemical structure to the 15W40 lubricating oil in your sump than it is to volatile, highly explosive, unleaded petrol.
Okay, so an engine designed to burn light oil can also burn heavy oil.
Absolutely. Because a diesel relies on extreme 18-to-1 or 20-to-1 compression ratios and immense heat to operate, it basically creates a highly efficient incineration chamber.
Right.
If the engine's compression is still in excellent condition, but an internal seal begins weeping a small amount of engine oil into the cylinder, the engine simply treats that raw engine oil as secondary fuel.
Well,
The heat and pressure are so intense that the engine burns the lubricating oil flawlessly, completely combusting it alongside the diesel fuel.
so the combustion process is so incredibly thorough that it completely destroys the evidence of the oil leak.
It incinerates the evidence entirely. No unburnt particles remain to form visible blue smoke exiting the tailpipe.
The exhaust looks crystal clear.
Completely clear. You could be driving 1,000 kilometers across the Simpson Desert, glancing in your mirror, admiring how cleanly your engine is running, completely oblivious to the fact that your engine is silently cannibalizing its own vital lubricating oil at a terrifying rate.
Because there is no warning light for a slow, continuous internal burn until the oil pressure drops to absolute zero.
And by that point, the bearings have already welded themselves to the crankshaft.
Game over.
Game over. Once an engine develops an appetite for its own oil, the consumption rate rarely slows down. It only accelerates.
This hidden trap is the exact reason why the Berrima Diesel experts are so fanatical about manual physical checks.
You have to do them.
You cannot rely on a clear exhaust pipe or the absence of blue smoke as a guarantee of engine health. Monitoring your oil consumption manually by checking the physical dipstick between service intervals is absolutely non-negotiable for a diesel owner.
It's the only way to know for sure.
That is a staggering insight. The sheer absence of a smoke signal does not guarantee the absence of a catastrophic mechanical problem.
Exactly right.
But returning to our diagnostic framework, assuming we do see a visible smoke signal, the white of unburnt fuel, the black of dangerous overfueling, or the blue of burning oil, we now understand the chemistry behind the colors.
We've got the footprints.
We have the footprints. But the Berrima team notes that simply identifying the color only provides half of the diagnostic picture. To arrive at a solution, rather than a guess, you have to establish the context.
Context is everything.
You have to document exactly when the smoke decides to appear.
Right. Context is the map that guides the mechanic. Pinpointing the precise driving conditions under which the vehicle chugs smoke narrows the diagnostic search grid from dozens of possibilities down to one or two specific components.
So let's analyze the three most common contextual scenarios that owners will encounter out in the Australian landscape.
Scenario 1.
Scenario 1. The startup. It's a freezing morning in the snowy mountains. The vehicle has been sitting overnight. The engine block is ice cold.
Freezing.
You turn the key, the engine clatters to life, and immediately blows a visible plume of smoke. What does that specific thermal state tell us?
Well, a completely cold engine is an incredibly honest engine. It hides absolutely nothing.
Honest engine. I like that.
When a diesel blows smoke exclusively upon cold startup, it is exposing the very early stages of internal mechanical wear and tear. We are looking at the fundamental physics of metallurgy here.
Metal shrinking and expanding.
Exactly. When internal engine components like the steel cylinder liners and the alloy pistons sit overnight in freezing temperatures, the metal physically contracts. It shrinks.
So the microscopic tolerances and gaps between all the moving parts are at their absolute widest point.
Yes. And because those gaps are widened by the cold, the engine is highly inefficient. Worn piston rings allow a tiny bit of compression to escape, or slightly brittle valve stem seals allow a drop of overnight oil to seep past.
So the engine struggles to generate perfect heat, leading to a plume of smoke.
Right.
But I've seen this 100 times. The owner idles the car for 5 minutes, drives to the end of the street, and the smoke completely vanishes.
And it vanishes because of thermal expansion.
The metal swells up.
Exactly. As the engine burns fuel, it generates immense heat. That heat rapidly transfers into the metal components. The pistons expand, the steel rings swell and physically push tighter against the cylinder walls, sealing up those microscopic gaps.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The oil stops bypassing, the compression returns to maximum efficiency, and the smoke clears.
So the mechanical wear and tear didn't magically disappear.
Not at all. It is still there, it is just temporarily masking itself behind the physics of thermal expansion. A cold start smoke signal is an early warning system that wear is actively occurring.
Okay, let's look at scenario 2. Under heavy load, you are towing a massive 3-ton caravan up a steep highway incline on a hot afternoon.
Foot to the floor.
Your foot is pinned to the floor, the turbo is screaming, the engine is operating at maximum capacity. You look in the mirror and see a steady stream of smoke. What are we differentiating here?
Okay, when an engine is under maximum sustained load, the internal cylinder pressures are at their absolute peak. If you look in the mirror and that smoke is distinctly blue, the diagnosis leans heavily towards severely worn compression rings.
Because of the pressure.
Right. The explosive pressure in the cylinder is so immense that it is physically blowing past the weakened rings, forcing oil vapor up and out.
But what if I'm on that exact same hill, towing the exact same caravan, but the smoke is dark, thick, and black?
The context of the load remains, but the color entirely shifts the diagnostic path.
It's fuel again.
Black smoke under extreme load is not a mechanical sealing failure. It is a fuel delivery failure. It indicates that the injector pump settings are fundamentally incorrect, or the injectors are failing to maintain the delicate air-fuel ratio under peak demand.
The engine wants more fuel, the pump gives it, but there isn't enough air.
Exactly.
So it's the exact same driving condition, but the variation in color leads to 2 entirely different repair strategies. Blue means tearing the engine block apart to replace rings, while black means tuning the pump or replacing the air filter.
See, if you just tell a mechanic it smokes on hills, they can't help you. The specific combination of color and context is everything.
Which perfectly leads us to scenario 3. And I think this is arguably the most fascinating and specific diagnostic condition in the notes. Let's talk about engine braking, or overrun.
Oh, this is a classic.
You've just crested the Great Dividing Range. You have a long, steep, winding descent ahead of you.
Yep.
To save your brake pads from overheating, you drop the automatic transmission into a low gear and let the engine hold the vehicle back.
Standard driving practice.
Right. The engine RPMs are screaming high, maybe 3,000 RPM, but your foot is entirely off the accelerator pedal. You coast all the way to the bottom of the mountain, you finally touch the gas pedal to accelerate away, and you are immediately engulfed in a massive, blinding puff of blue smoke.
And everyone behind you hates you.
Exactly. What mechanical event just occurred?
You just executed a textbook diagnostic test for worn valve stem seals.
The top-down leak.
Yes. We need to visualize the physics occurring inside the intake manifold during that long descent. Your foot is completely off the throttle, meaning the fuel injectors are shut off and the main air intake throttle plate is mostly closed.
So the engine is essentially being starved of both air and fuel.
Right.
But the wheels of the heavy 4WD are mechanically linked to the engine through the transmission. Gravity is forcing the 4WD down the hill, which forces the wheels to turn, which forces the engine to spin at 3,000 RPM.
Exactly. The engine is being violently spun by the momentum of the vehicle, attempting to draw in massive gulps of air through a closed intake.
Which creates a vacuum.
It creates a colossal, intense vacuum condition inside the cylinders. The engine is sucking incredibly hard, desperately trying to find air from absolutely anywhere it can.
And it finds the path of least resistance.
It finds the aged, hardened, cracked rubber valve stem seals sitting at the very top of the cylinder head.
Oh, wow.
That massive vacuum literally sucks the liquid engine oil right past those failed seals, drawing it down the valve shafts where it pools and collects inside the cylinders during the entire descent.
But it doesn't burn on the way down the hill because my foot is off the gas. There was no fuel being injected to create the intense heat required for auto ignition.
Right, the oil just sits there in the dark.
It pools on top of the pistons.
Yep, and the trap is sprung the absolute second you reach the bottom of the hill and touch the accelerator.
The injectors fire.
The diesel ignites, the temperatures instantly skyrocket to 800 degrees, and the engine burns that massive accumulated pool of raw oil in one gigantic violent gulp.
Which creates the cloud.
The result is an enormous, embarrassing cloud of thick blue smoke that suddenly ejects from the tailpipe, only to clear up a few seconds later once the pooled oil is fully incinerated.
This specific scenario perfectly crystallizes the entire ethos of Berrima Diesel's diagnose first philosophy.
It really does.
Because if I just ring up the workshop and say, hey mate, my 4WD blew a massive cloud of blue smoke today, how much is the part to fix it? They cannot possibly give me an honest answer.
No, they have to interrogate you.
They have to ask, did it blow blue smoke when you started it freezing cold in the driveway this morning? Or did it blow blue smoke right after you engine braked down a massive mountain pass? The context changes the entire physical reality of the diagnosis.
It changes everything from the diagnostic approach to the final invoice. It is the literal difference between a relatively straightforward top-end repair to replace a few rubber seals versus pulling the entire engine out of the chassis to perform a complete bottom-end rebuild of the pistons and rings.
Getting intimately familiar with your 4WD, understanding its mechanical baseline, tracking your average fuel economy from tank to tank, monitoring that oil consumption religiously on the physical dipstick.
And observing exactly when the smoke decides to make an appearance.
These are the habits that will dictate just how deep into your pockets you'll have to reach when things inevitably go wrong in the bush.
Absolutely true.
So let's wrap this up and consolidate the core lessons from today's incredibly deep dive into the diagnostic muddy waters.
Let's do it.
Exhaust smoke is a physical language your vehicle is actively using to communicate its internal health to you. White smoke means unburned fuel, indicating a critical lack of the heat, pressure, or atomization required for combustion.
Right.
Black smoke means dangerous overfueling, generating excessive exhaust gas temperatures that threaten to melt your turbocharger and pistons.
The wallet drainer.
Exactly. And blue smoke means your engine is cannibalizing its own vital lubricating oil through worn internal seals or excessive blow-by. But the color alone is only the very first footprint in the dirt.
Just the beginning.
It is the specific timing, the engine temperature, and the physical driving load that reveal the true identity of the mechanical failure. Catching these subtle clues early, interpreting them accurately rather than guessing, and having a smoky engine thoroughly analyzed by a dedicated diesel expert will universally save you thousands of dollars in the long run.
And perhaps more importantly for the Australian tourer, it prevents you from becoming that miserable person stuck on the side of a remote, dusty track, waiting 3 days for an incredibly expensive tow truck.
Nobody wants to be that guy.
Nobody, especially because of a catastrophic failure that the engine was desperately trying to advertise to you for 6 months beforehand.
Absolutely. We want to extend a massive thank you to Berrima Diesel Service for providing the foundational workshop experience and the decades of meticulous technical notes that made this specific analysis possible.
They are legends in the industry.
They really are. The 3 generations of the Limeroth family have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is absolutely no substitute for deliberate, precise diesel diagnosis, and that risking DIY repairs by blindly throwing expensive parts at a symptom is a recipe for financial disaster.
It ultimately comes down to respecting the engineering of the machinery, understanding the intense physics happening under the bonnet, and taking the time to actually listen to what the vehicle is telling you.
Yes, listen to your car.
And I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over, building directly on the hidden trap we discussed earlier.
The silent oil burner.
Yes. We have firmly established the terrifying reality that a high-compression diesel engine can actually burn its own leaking oil so cleanly and so efficiently that the blue smoke becomes entirely invisible to the naked eye.
Yep.
It really makes you wonder. If you look in the rearview mirror on your next trip and your exhaust looks perfectly clean, what invisible, catastrophic clues is your dipstick trying to warn you about right now, hidden away in the dark?
That is a terrifying but completely necessary question that every single 4WD owner needs to ask themselves before they pack the car for their next big trip.
Oh, check your oil, basically.
Basically, yeah. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive on the Berrima Diesel podcast. Stay safe out there on the tracks. Keep a very close eye on your mirrors. Check your oil every single morning, and we will see you on the next deep dive.